And we're back with Lightroom Basics Part 2. In the last video, you learned how to import a photo. You learned about putting things in the library and what you can do in the library with white balance and tone control and exposure and vibrance. And you also learned that you can click on the Developing tab and we can do more stuff, right? And so we took this photo and we cropped it using the cropping tool. We exposed the photo a little bit more in a more desirable way. And I'm going to continue to do that just a little bit. I think it could be just a little lighter. And we acknowledge the fact that there are a bunch of things that we can do here. There are a ton of controls on this side. And most of them you really won't need to use because you could really mess up your photo, I guess, in a way. Of course, you can undo it, so it's not that big of a deal. And some of this stuff you're just going to have to play around with. Notice that when you use these sliders, it does change the histogram. So if you've been dragging things around on the histogram and then you go down here and slide these sliders over, it's going to mess up your progress with the histogram. It's going to change things as far as that's concerned. So you may want to just use the histogram. It sort of is a blanket way to sort of change your settings. Let's say, though, we'd like to be a little more vibrant. I don't know, the red's pretty vibrant already. But you can turn it up. If you turn it way up, you're going to notice that it's distorted, right? If I were you, I would never go more than 20. 20 is a pretty good guideline. If you're above 20, you better have a really good reason when it comes to being this number over here, being a positive or a negative. Either way, I wouldn't do more than 20 if I were you. As a matter of fact, I think this red back here in the background is kind of bright. So I'm not going to go too crazy with the vibrance. And I might even turn the saturation down a little bit. If you turn it all the way down, it's black and white, right? But there's a better way to do black and white, so I wouldn't suggest that. I'm just going to leave that at 0. And then we have tone, which is, and this is curves. If you're ever in Photoshop and you know about curves, this is sort of the same thing. A little different, but kind of the same, along the same lines. It deals with highlights and shadows and darks. This has to do with color balance. You can choose the color that you want to tone down. Like right now we're on red, but let's say you wanted to work with orange or yellow. You could click on whatever color it is that you need to turn down or change. Let's say I want to turn down the saturation of just the red a little bit. You can do that, and notice it's not changing the blue of the Patriot shirt here, but it is changing the red back here so that it's just a little less of an assault on your eyes because it is kind of bright back there, so that sort of changes things. Now luminance, what it does is it sort of smooths things out. If you have a really high ISO and it looks real grainy, luminance can kind of help with that just a little bit. But don't go crazy with it because I've realized that if you put too much luminance on something, they look kind of plastic, or maybe just a hair blurry. That sort of soft blur that you sort of like in some photos, like wedding photos and whatnot, that's luminance. But it's not appropriate for everything, especially for like a weightlifting photo. So you've got to be aware of why you're making the edits that you're making. We're going to skip down. This shows us detail. If you super zoom in, this is like right here, this little spot right here. If you zoom in a lot, you're going to see sort of this graininess here. All photos have that. It's just a matter of where, and the ISO is part of that, and also the pixelation, the quality of the photo has something to do with that as well. Now if you want to sharpen it, you can sharpen it a little bit, and you'll notice what that does to the graininess here. It makes it a little more pronounced. So I wouldn't suggest doing much with sharpening unless you really have to. And then here's noise reduction. This is another thing you can do if you feel that it is too grainy or there seems to be a lot of just kind of visual noise in the background, distracting spots and stuff. You can turn the luminance up, turn the details up or down, and the contrast as well. And that can kind of help you with that just a little bit. And the smoothness can too. Now we're really not going to have any reason to use any of the stuff that's in Transform that much. So we're going to skip that. Same with, you know, effects and lens correction and all that stuff. But one thing in effects that's helpful is dehaze. Sometimes you have a photo that looks a little hazy after you have edited it. And so if you dehaze it just a little bit, it will make it a lot sharper, more clear. It takes away the white sort of haziness that we sometimes see. So that's everything over here on this side. Now over here is another palette. And this palette has what we call presets. And if you Google Lightroom presets, you're going to find all kinds of stuff you can download from the internet to put special effects onto your camera with, onto your photo with one click. We have black and white presets. And of course you can see them here, and you can kind of flip through how they do. Personally, I don't think we really have too much of a reason to do black and white things, unless we decide we have a black and white photo. But you can also do things that make them look old, like bleached bypass and cold tone. Kind of looks like an old faded photograph, right? And we have some cross processes. Most of these are pretty useless to us. With Yearbook, we really don't want to like mess with that sort of thing, but they're sort of nice for you know, portraits. And then we have Vignette, which will darken the edges a little bit, you know, and sort of highlight what's in the middle. But you can see what it's done to our histogram here, right? So I'm not a real big fan of all that stuff. Here's sort of like an opposite of that. Auto tone will kind of change the tone just a little bit. And you've got all kinds of stuff. Now some of these things I've downloaded just because I really liked them, but you can see what's good for one photo is not going to be good for everything. Like golden hour, really, I don't know, golden hour in the weight room is kind of silly. That's sort of a romantic preset. So really, we don't really like to use all that stuff. But know that they're there, and we do have the opportunity to use presets if we decide that that's something that we want to do with the Yearbook. However, I'm cool with not ever doing that. I really am. So let me kind of undo. I'm going to undo all of my presets here and go back to my original. And there is a way to go back to it in one click, but I can't remember what it is. So here we are. Alright, so I'm going back way too far. I'm still going back. Alright, so here we are again with the original photo. So let's say we have this picture and we really like it the way that it is. I do think there are some things we could do, maybe with the contrast and whatnot, to make it a little better. But let's say we really like it the way it is, and so we're going to export it. To export this photo, we go over here to File, Export, right? Or you can hit Control-Shift-E. It'll bring up this menu, and this is very, 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 very important. First of all, where are you going to put it? Well, we want to put it in a specific folder. You can choose a lot of things, but I want you to put it in a specific folder, and you're going to choose that folder, and you're going to put it on the server in the place where you think you will use it best. If it's going into onto your spread, then you should put it in your page folder. If you're not sure whether it's going onto your spread, if you're on the fence about it at all, put it back in the content folder in another folder that says edited, right? So I'm going to put it in an edited folder because that lets me know that I have edited. Now this says Bandcamp, and I'm not really into that, so I'm going to go over here and make a new one. And I'm going to call it Edited Football. Oops, Football. Football. Alright, there we go. And I'm going to select that folder, and we're good to go there. Oops, yeah, there it is. Alright, now, I also want to custom name it. So you click Rename to Custom Name Y of Y, and you're going to type in the root of it. It's very important that all of your photos are named correctly. And the reason we do this is so we know where in the yearbook it should go chronologically. So we have to include the date. So I'm going to say that this, I don't remember exactly what day it was. So I'm going to say it was July So 7.24, because I'm going to say it was the 24th of July. And I may want to look back at my records and make sure. And then we're going to put your first initial and your last name. Now, if you have someone who has the last name and the same first initial as you, then you're going to want to put your whole first name. So I'm going to put my pseudonym, S. Anderson, so that I know who the photo is by. Because when the designer writes the caption, there's going to have to be a photo by thing that goes at the end of the caption, and they need to know who took the photo. So if you name it with your name, there will be no question as to when it was taken and who took it. And now we need to say what this photo is. So I'm going to say football practice. And that's it. Now this start number is start number 1. So it's going to number all of the photos that you export. So let's say you export 25 photos. It's going to automatically name them all so that you don't have to go in and individually name each file. It can name 200 files for you. And all it'll do, it'll say like 724 Anderson football practice 1, 724 Anderson football practice 2, and so on until all of them have been taken. It's also very important to know, for the dates, it has to be a dot. You cannot put a slash there because your computer will read that as a command, okay? So you really can't deal with slashes at all. You have to use the dots. The dots are like extensions. It's like saying, okay, here's another piece. So the dots will work, but the slashes will not for the date. So never, never use a slash in the date. It will jack things up, okay? So once you've got your name and you've got your folder specifically that it's going to, we're going to click Export, and you're going to see up here is a little progress meter that will show you, and you know, depending on how many you have to export, you may be taking a long time to do that. So we're done with exporting that picture because we just had one picture, right? So I'm going to go over here into my desktop, and I think I gotta figure it out. I got a lot of stuff. Look at all this stuff on my desktop. It's just not even, I'm not even dealing with that very well. Alright, and I'm not sure where that went. It went into, I'm gonna look for 7.24 S. Anderson. And there it is. Okay, and so now I've got my photo here, and it's right where I put it, and you can see there it is. Alright, and so really that is the long and short of what you need to know. Up here we have other things that we can do with Lightroom that I'm really quite unfamiliar with. Using the map module, obviously you can see I've never used it before, but it will let you see or mark where your photos were taken. You can put a GPS coordinate. The coordinates will actually appear on the map. This is kind of a scary thing, people, and this is sort of where we are right now with technology, is that your photos are embedded with the information and the exact GPS coordinates of where you took them, and there's really not much you can do about that. Have them apples, right? So anyway, you can do that. I don't think it's necessary for us to do that at this point. However, if we have some pictures from Europe, the Europe trip that we want to use, and we want to know exactly where they are, we can bring them into Lightroom and look at the map and see if maybe we can get some information. So that's kind of nice. Print and web and slideshow and book, we're not going to be using those things, so it's all good. Alright, so that is pretty much everything I want you to know at this point about Lightroom, and there are more things we can do with Lightroom, but for now, that's all we need. So I hope that you can use Lightroom just a little bit now and try importing your own photos and monkeying around with them and see what you can make happen here. And we'll see you later in the next tutorial, which is Photoshop Basics.